Okay, well, I just want to put up a little bit of a video for the Management 411 class. It's a series of about 40 plus a couple PowerPoint slides that speak to business policy, different aspects, and so forth. So I hope you'll have the opportunity to play this. Let me start to screen share and see if we can get through this. So hopefully you're seeing that. I'm going to minimize this up here, keep it out of the way. This was originally a policy PowerPoint put together by Dr. Fred Ritchie. He was teaching at Georgetown University at the time. He was one of my doctoral professors back in the day. Allowed me to use and modify this, so we ended up using the combined version at different locations. And I recently updated this for our purposes this summer. So policy, as much as anything else, and I think I've stated this, is about the search or quest for competitive advantage. But as I mentioned, as much as anything else, there are other things as well. So business policy has changed and continues to change. And some of that is predicated by, as the slide indicates, the explosion now of cross-border business and global investment. There have been dramatic geopolitical shifts that have redefined global economies and subsequently economic balances, not the least of which is what we hear on the news many evenings that have to do with energy and logistics and fighting between different nation states and so forth. And there are certainly new market demographics and multilateral trade pacts which change basically the world marketplace. And we find, of course, that as politics changes, some of these trade arrangements change as well. China is probably currently a gleaming example of that. But looking at the business leaders, the executives, and so forth, today's executives really focus on business policy and the idea, and you know I don't like contrived phrases, but I'll borrow this one briefly. So policy and something called a global local strategy. In other words, localizing whatever decisions we would be making in effect to conduct global trade, international trade. And we use the phrases global trade, international trade synonymously these days. They don't mean exactly the same thing, but they're close enough for what we're talking about. This, of course, involves strategic perspectives on finance, human resource issues, marketing, and then global supply chain. In the 80s and 90s and even the early 2000s, CEOs were more interested and more tied into the idea of categorizing and analyzing and quantifying and predicting what the future would hold. But by the year 2022, where we are, there have been obviously, and it's an understatement of a lifetime to say there have been drastic changes in the stock market. Retirement portfolios have lost hundreds, literally hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're down in the 29,000, in terms of the Dow, 29,000 range versus 30,000 plus. There continues to be an explosion of e-business, both large and small. The frenzy for joint ventures and franchising and M&A activities continues, although that has recently been impacted by cost of capital due to inflation and so forth. There is a growing, again, global interdependence, and if you doubt that, look at fuel or fossil fuels, for example, home heating oil, gas, etc. Unreliable global accounting activities make it tough to conduct global affairs or global business because we can't, not every nation state subscribes to the rigidity of the accounting system that we employ domestically. And as a result, it's more than just, we hear transaction risk, translation risk being that major accounting factor, but it's more than that. It's different systems. It's systems that are less robust, audited differently, if at all. And that makes reliance on global accounting information kind of a tough proposition. And so all of this leads us back to data analysis on a continuing basis. I apologize, my throat's a little sore today, so I'm sipping on some, tea with honey and so forth. So today, really, and the way I'd phrase it is the big policy thinkers are back. Strategy leaders with vision are highly sought after. Want a great example? And I know I say this frequently, but it happens to be true. Dr. Bernie McSherry, our dean, and he may be taking on a new position, but our dean, Dr. McSherry, he was one of the governors of the New York Stock Exchange. He was managing director level, which is to say MD level, CEO level of several firms. He spent his life and career on Wall Street. This is a guy with vision. And this is the kind of leader or leadership that is sought after and highly sought after these days. Data-driven analysis is in demand rather than shoot from the hip, I think, or I believe I know. Planning the future of markets and competitors using data and using other tools is in demand. And overall, globally, pretty much a growth strategy. Some call it a survival strategy. We must grow to survive. But a growth strategy is fueling what is a struggling at the moment global economy. But it is very much the business of global expansion. Globalization continues to change the world. That's an understatement of a lifetime. But some statistics, in case you're ever on Jeopardy, within the past 20 years, trade growth has averaged 6% a year, global trade growth, and has been growing twice as fast as output. Foreign direct investment is up 77% to 1.65 trillion in 2021, or as of 2021. Foreign exchange market soared above the 1.95 trillion mark from 2021 to 22. So it's beyond that. And cross-border transactions in bonds and equities surged from 3% of America's GDP in 1970, and I give you that statistic just to put this in perspective, to over 245% of GDP today. That's quite extraordinary. So business policy, and again, yes, about the quest for competitive advantage, but it requires managers to know, to understand, accept, and support the firm's mission, and to develop a comprehensive approach to thinking, planning, and decision-making. It's not just arbitrary stuff today. So managing vision, well, of course, we want to concentrate on positive achievements. And that's what we do in preparing for change. In terms of analyzing and forecasting, well, we add discipline. And this idea of analyzing, forecasting adds discipline to the very nature of analysis and planning. And then as far as planning and directing operations, well, this is what translates into a clear path towards implementation. Most things sound good when you say it fast. You sit around a boardroom table and, well, we designed this, or we intend to implement that, and we've created a strategy. Yeah. Sounds good when you say it fast. It's the implementation that's the tough part. We learned previously, I'm certain, of something called Boston Consulting Group, the BCG matrix. And BCG matrix categorized, basically products, arguably services as well, but products into stars, cash cows, question marks, and dogs. Well, it has to do with growth rates and market share. And I'm not going to rehash that here. That's not the purpose of the course. But BCG matrix, this BCG GS meaning growth share matrix, is a tool for us. It's a great tool to use in business policy. Let's talk about strategic intent briefly. And it probably is just what it sounds like. Strategic intent. Well, it is the very trait of successful managers. It's the cornerstone of strategically successful managers. Managers should determine what their or our core competencies or key corporate skills, or sometimes KSFs, all these acronyms for basically the things that give us competitive edge, competitive advantage. Well, determine what these things are and create strategic intent, basically the large scale desire to use to our best advantage this stuff to invent a new future. It's imagination and not resources that are scarce. Creativity and innovation probably go hand in hand to a great extent, but there's not a whole lot of that around. Why? Because we're tied up doing all kinds of other things. We're trying to get to Friday, and that's early on a Monday morning. But this idea, Disney for decades called it Imagineering, imagination, engineering, Imagineering. Well, that's what's scarce. That's what's not readily available oftentimes today. We can involve new voices in the process to increase the odds of seeing what the future might be a bit more clearly, because again, it helps us avoid groupthink. We sit around a table, if it's the same 5 people, the same 10 people, the same 25 people, we're going to get the same old ideas. So it's not the worst idea in the world to bring in what I'll characterize as extraordinary ideas, to mean extraordinary, out of the ordinary. Put differently, what some might see as bizarre ideas, strange ideas. But that's the very kind of thing we need to incorporate if we're going to build strategic intent. Pivotal strategy questions. Well, what is business, the economy, the political environment, all these things? What's that all going to be like in the 21st century as we progress through? Where and on whom should I focus? In terms of clients, to be sure, in terms of other delivering mechanisms, research and development, engineering, both internal and external, science, technology, politics, etc. And what do we need to own as critical success factors beyond the year 2030? How should I be re-engineering my strategy, my organization, and my very competitive position? Remember, policy, as much as anything else, is about the quest for competitive advantage. To help us with strategy formulation, and I know some are used to, and I beg your pardon again, some are used to SWOT analysis. And I poke at, lovingly, of course, but I poke at some of my colleagues when I hear phrases like, well, we want to look at strategy here, so the very first thing we're going to do is conduct a SWOT analysis. I almost choke on that. Not quite so literally, but I almost choke on that. And you know what? You should too, and here's why. SWOT is not a strategic level model. It can be used that way. I will concede that much. But it is a tactical level model most of the time when it's prescribed. Think about it. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. All right, strengths, weaknesses, that's the stuff internal to the firm. Opportunities, threats, that's kind of stuff external to the firm. So what do we hear when someone says, well, let's do a SWOT analysis? And we say, well, gee, we got all new desktop computers. That's a strength. Yeah, but that's not really strategic, is it? The answer is no, in case you were confused. Well, we relined the parking lot and we put in stations for EV vehicles so they can plug in. I'm not complaining about that. Sounds good when you say it fast. I mean, I don't know. It's a good idea, but it's not strategic. And so you begin to see that when we use SWOT, we can name all kinds of seemingly positive things, but also seemingly ridiculous and trite things, and try to mark them up as being strategic, and they're not. So there is an alternate model, and I've been using it for years, and it's called SAP ETOP, Strategic Advantage Business Profile, Environmental Threats and Opportunities Profile. So the SAP side of the calculus obviously seems to be related to the firm. It's very much akin to the S&W, strengths, weaknesses, and SWOT, only different. ETOP, environmental threats and opportunities, is kind of what it sounds like, only again, strategic, and we're dealing with strategic elements. And remember, strategic level, big picture stuff, tactical level, small micro stuff. So ETOP is somewhat akin to the OT and SWOT, opportunities and threats, only we're looking at this as strategic, big picture stuff. Competitive advantage. Well, internal areas, strengths and weaknesses, we're going to deal with in terms of SAP, Strategic Advantage Profile. This is one of those instances, probably fewer and fewer these days, but one of those instances where profiling is a good thing. What are we profiling? Well, the elements of strategic advantage are things like marketing. You know, it's not that we made this new ad or we put something up on YouTube. All right, that's tactical level stuff. Strategic is the element of marketing, big picture. R&D, research and development. Well, whether we do it internally or it's a purchased service, R&D is an example of strategic advantage, an area where we might be on big picture level, on a strategic level, bigger, better, faster than our competitor or competitors. Production and operations is another one. Resources, you know, used to be MRP, material resources planning and so forth, incorporated with just-in-time delivery. Resources, personnel, finance. So if we look at marketing and distribution, that would incorporate efficient, effective sales, subsequently an efficient and effective sales force, direct sales force, distribution, whichever. Effective advertising in establishing the company's product or brand image to develop loyal customers. Other internal factors related to marketing and distribution, product service line completes phase of a life cycle, requiring what? Because we all understand from our marketing classes, product life cycle, and that applies to services as well. Well, requires what? Strong new product and new service leadership in either the current or new field, an emerging field. And subsequently, all of the patent protection or the equivalent for services, you know, that's a required component given the very litigious nature of our society. Other marketing and distribution factors include efficient and effective market research and a systemized approach to that. The product service mix, the quality of the products and the services aligned with client expectations. Supply chain and distribution aligned with the concept of immediacy. We don't want stuff 3 days from now. We don't want stuff a week from now. I want it today. And even Amazon is a glaring example of where not everything, I can usually have everything within a day, maybe a couple of days. But if I get on Amazon today, I can have it today for many things. Immediacy, just in time. Customers, well, there's an old boss of mine that, I'm not going to say how many years ago, but many years ago. His name was Floyd Schultz. He was an Army Air Corps pilot in World War II. Flew, I don't know, whatever it was, P-41s, flew, I don't know, a bunch of different things. I used to know the planes that he flew. And I gained a lot of wisdom and knowledge from him. We worked together at, at the time, the third largest trading company in Japan. And among the many Floydisms, as I refer to them, it really, and he pointed this out routinely to me, it's not what I am trying to impose or what I am trying to deliver or present necessarily. It begins with customer wants and needs, or client wants and needs, if you prefer, real or perceived. It's not our duty to judge whether somebody really needs this or just wants this. Look, somebody's knocking on your door with a fistful of cash, you know what the answer is, but it's customer driven. And, the strategy really is about making choices. And this kind of thing leads us down the road of, well, whatever we've been doing, if it was good yesterday, is it still good today? And if it's not, what is it that we have to do to meet client expectations today? Because that's kind of a moving target. Customer-oriented questions, well, do I have an adequate understanding of my customer? Do I serve this customer group that I seem to want to deal with? Or really am I serving another client base? How are my customers evolving and changing? Any shifts in my customer profiles? These are some of the big questions we need to be addressing. Another internal factor, SAP, Strategic Advantage Profile, the internals, versus ETOP, Environmental Threats Opportunities Profile, the externals. So other internal factors, R&D and engineering, research and development and engineering. Basic research capabilities, are they internal or purchased services? And it doesn't matter sometimes a whole lot which, because we can purchase engineering and R&D and all of this stuff. We don't necessarily have to do that internally. And Porter's value chain speaks to some of these things, and we know that from our past studies. What about the capability for product engineering? Is that something we can do? Can we do it well? Is that something we ought to be purchasing on the outside? If we do it internally, do we have the people to do that? Excellence in product and process design. Is that a capacity we have? Superior design, superior delivery, perhaps packaging developments for whatever it is we're working with. Do we have these capacities? And remember, these are the internals. These are the controllables. These are the things that are within the direct control of the firm. Improvements in the use of older new materials. Many things in another lifetime were made out of aluminum or steel or a high nickel content steel or stainless steel or any of those things are injected, injection molded plastic these days. Ability to meet design goals and customer requirements, is that something we can do and do well? Well-equipped laboratories for testing and other, and is that something we can do internally, or is this too another purchased service or services? Trained and experienced technicians and scientists, all of these things are factors we have to wrestle with. To continue, the work environment, is it suited to creativity and innovation? There was something eons ago for all of us, I suppose. At Western Electric, it was called the Hawthorne study, and the outcome became known as the Hawthorne effect. I'm sure you studied this. And the paraphrased, abbreviated version goes like this. Profitability was down, and here at this Western Electric facility, there was it was almost like piecework in the sense that it was a big production line, a lot of different things were being made, and productivity was down. So based on some complaints and inputs and so forth, the company management came in, and these dreary, warehouse-like operations and facilities, well, they were painted into a bright, clean white color. Well, productivity went up, and then it went down again. And so somebody had the genius idea, well, maybe it's the lighting. So all this old dimly, dim bulb lighting kind of stuff, that was all yanked out. New lighting was put in. Productivity went up, productivity went back down, and so on and so forth. The long story short is this. It wasn't the specific item, the lighting, the color of the walls, the perhaps airflow, whatever the elements were. It was the employee reaction to being noticed, to being thought about, to being considered. That's what generated that positive. So when we consider things like work environment, yes, environment includes how we treat people. I mean, duh. So an environment suited to creativity and innovation. I used to love phrases. Look, you're a very creative engineer, Lasky. You got to go out there and you got to this, and this. And I need it by Friday. There are a couple of words I'd like to use, but to keep some kind of a decorum here, I won't use them. Creativity, innovation, and I need it by Friday. I can't think of too many things that are more antithetical than that expression. So same kind of thing. If you really mean what you say as a manager of the firm, create an environment of creativity and innovation. Task appropriate people in an appropriate way, and then leave them the heck alone. You can't force creativity. You can't force innovation. And this is all part of policy. Managers who can explain goals to researchers and then research results to higher management. Do you think the CEO, now there are exceptions, the CEO really cares whether it's a left-handed thread or a right-handed thread, or you use this kind of a machine? That's not their job. They've got a different tasking, but they do want to be kept in the loop and informed. So you need somebody that can translate, in quotes. Neutron Jack, when he ran General Electric, and it was one of my clients back in the day, and I met him. And he was doing a plant floor tour of one of the facilities. I happened to be there on that day. And he walked up to somebody on the particular production line, machinery production line. And he asked him, he said, what do you do here? And the guy, as it turned out, the guy says, well, and whatever the thing was, I take this and I tighten that and I do this. And Jack Welch, Neutron Jack, said, that's not what I'm asking you. And his point was this: everyone needs to understand how they fit, strategic fit, but how they fit in an organization. In other words, the organization, mission and vision and all this stuff, everybody needs to know that, embrace it, understand it, and then see how they fit in that overall calculus. And then, so as to not make this the longest PowerPoint you've ever sat through, the ability of a unit to perform effective technological forecasting. Forecasting, particularly demand forecasting, is absolutely crucial. Now look, forecasting is a guess. as several of my OPPM course, operations, production, project management course. We talk about forecasting and it's important, and we talk and its importance, and we incorporate several different forecasting techniques. Excuse me again. But again, forecasting is a cornerstone of a lot of things that we do, and it drives other things. Production and operations, well, effective and efficient equipment and machinery, efficient and effective offices, strategic location of facilities and offices, efficient and effective inventory control. Well, this is all part of OPPM. Lower than competitors' total cost of operation. Great example, Walmart and Target. Two different stores to be sure, but Walmart years ago, probably now 30 years ago, made a big bet, a big investment in EDI technology, electronic data interchange, the satellite stuff. So when you get your receipt at the register, the point of sale system, it's not only calculating and giving you a total of what you owe the firm, but it's also decrementing inventory and translating this information back to where's Walmart? Arkansas or something, Bentonville. Yeah, Bentonville, Arkansas, I think is where it is. And it's not necessarily real time, but it's within 10 or 15 minutes. Headquarters in Bentonville knows what's selling in what area of the country. Yes, the inventory is already being taken care of. More inventory is being shipped based on the sales, based on that information. You see how the pieces fit together. But that's what we're talking about here. And you know what? Walmart did that in, whatever the year was. We'll call it $1980. And Target, didn't do that until many years later. So it cost them a lot more to have a less efficient system. So lower than competitors' total cost of operations. Well, that was part of it. Capacity to meet market demands. Again, some of the investments they made allows that to happen more readily, more easily. Efficient and effective facilities. Raw materials and assemblies and the costs, the overall costs of those things, and adequate availability of raw materials. The last two probably don't apply to Walmart, in the example that I'm using here, but certainly other manufacturing firms that actually produce something, even the My Pillow guy. And the only thing I have against that is, the commercials. Well, I manufacture right here in the United States. Manufacture. All right, that should almost be used in quotes, because what you do is you have a bunch of people with shredded foam stuffing what in essence are cloth material bags, sewing it in shut, and it's a pillow, and that's manufacturing. Well, back in my days of factory automation and robotics and flexible manufacturing and blah blah blah, all that great stuff, tight tolerance, high manufacturing, high spec manufacturing, all of this stuff, that's what manufacturing was. I guess we consider stuffing pillowcases with foam manufacturing today. Whatever. Resources and personnel, high quality employees. In another course and with another author, Paul Hersey, Situational Leadership, Hersey Blanchard. High quality employees, he breaks it down into a matrix of 4 types. And basically, the 4 types are, the willing and the knowledgeable. So in other words, people that know their job and they're willing to do it. The willing but unknowledgeable, and that's a really good mix, because they're willing to walk on broken glass for you. They just don't know what you want them to do, so they can be trained. Then you have the unwilling and unable, so to speak. Well, they don't know the job and they've got a crappy attitude. They don't want to do it even if they knew it. So I don't know why somebody like that was hired to begin with. And then you have my favorite group to pick on, the unwilling but able. And you know what that group is? And we've all said it. So, I'm not poking too hard here. But that's the group of people that says, you know what, I don't get paid enough for this, or no, not my job, or it's closing time, you'll have to talk to somebody else. That is the employee you fire immediately, no questions asked. And in an at-will state like New Jersey, at-will employment state, that's a relatively easy thing to do. You catch somebody with those kinds of comments, they're out the door. And there's a whole discussion as to why. But when we say high quality employees, we're probably talking about the first two groups. Certainly the willingness to work the mission of the firm. They have to be mission driven. As to how knowledgeable they are, well, they can be trained, or you can, in a sense, buy them already trained, high quality employees. Balanced functional experience and track record of top management. Well, balanced functional experience and a record, let's say, of good management or achievement or something like that. Well, that would seem to intuitively make a lot of sense. The functional experience. Do you ever have a boss that knows absolutely nothing about the job? Rhetorical question, but many of us have been there. Effective relations with trade unions. One of my clients was Eastman Kodak when they were still alive. And we were putting in a factory automated system, you know, robots and all this great stuff. And so the stuff had come over from Japan, and you know, I was the engineer that designed and built the system, and ultimately was there to sell it to top management. You know, it was worth a couple of $1 million. So I'm there, and the stuff comes in, and all I wanted to do, all I was doing, because it was a very union shop, Eastman Kodak, part of their demise, by the way. But all I wanted to do was crack open the shipping container, you know, the wooden crates this stuff comes in, and just peek inside and make sure nothing was damaged. That's all I was doing. So I got a pry bar and I got a hammer, and I'm banging on the side of this case, tearing it open. Do you know 901 Elm Grove Road, Rochester, New York? Hand to God. Do you know that place almost went on strike because of me? People came running out of, you know, you can't do that. What do you mean I can't? I'm just looking to see if you have to call the riggers union. I have to call the riggers union. Yeah, and they have to come over with the carpenters. They have to bring the forklift, raise it. The carpenters union, and it was all this nonsense, or what seemed to me to be nonsense. I guess my larger point is effective relations or good relations with trade unions can usually avoid or at least mitigate some of this stuff. That damn place almost walked based on me trying to open a crate just to see if something was damaged. Globally knowledgeable managers. We can all spot a phony. People that say, oh, well, I lived overseas for 6 months or 2 years, or I did this or I did that. Just because you lived somewhere for 6 months or a year doesn't mean you know a damn thing. There are a lot of people that talk that way too. They talk the talk, but they sure as hell don't know. Time for a sip. Access to professional accounting, finance, and marketing if we don't have adequate skills. For example, doing global business, well, hedging has to be part of the calculus. And if we don't know how to do that, we usually don't, then we hire the Goldman Sachs, the JP Morgans, the Merrill Lynches, and so forth. Other internal factors, resources and personnel still, but effective personnel relations policies, having efficient MIS, EIS, ES, and other computer systems. The enterprise's record for reaching objectives, in other words, achieving results, is an important internal factor. Having influence with different regulatory and international governmental bodies, sometimes referred to as, you know, the iron triangle, you know, business, politics. get the idea. That's for another discussion. But, effective iron triangle relationships is important. Effective corporate professional staff and support systems is important. Amicable relations between stakeholders and stockholders. And especially in this American capitalism, we have to be clear on objectives here. Who owns the firm? You got it. The stockholders. Are they on an equal footing with the stakeholders? Now, I'm not asking whether they should be or what's right or what's wrong or what's good or what's bad. Are they on an no is the answer. No. And, your business students, this is not a sociology program. No is the answer. We look also for advantageous tax conditions, the appropriate insurances to minimize, what we call in finance, the frictions of finance, but, insurance, dealing with liability exposures, et cetera, et cetera. Effective financial planning, working capital, and capital budgeting. Remember back in corporate finance, WACC, weighted average cost of capital? Aha. Total financial resources and strength. We look at things like liquidity and leverage and profitability and activity and turnover and cash flows and blah, 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 blah. And obviously, the lower cost of capital, the better. And again, that brings us back to our capital structure and ding, 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 weighted average cost of capital. Aha. Efficient and effective accounting systems and auditing procedures. And that is especially important after all of this stuff from Enron. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you read about it, maybe you studied it in a course. And then appropriate, at least, inventory valuation policies. So we had mentioned SAP ETOP. It's kind of an inventory analysis. So marketing, is it a plus? Is it a minus? Is it a neutral? In other words, a positive, a negative, or just kind of there. So marketing, well, product line is extensive and service is excellent. Well, that would be a plus. Well, our channels of distribution are weak, especially in Latin America. Well, that would be a minus, a negative. Next item, and this is just a contrived list, but to give you an example. R&D, well, we've not performed any research and development for 2 years. Well, that's a distinct negative. What about operations? Well, we have excellent sourcing for raw materials, meaning supply chain and other, and that's a positive. Okay. Corporate resources. Company size is about average. Well, okay, so that doesn't particularly hurt us or help us necessarily. Profits are consistent, but average. Again, that's a neutral. Union employees frequently complain. There's always a union issue going. That's a big negative. Finance, and so you get the idea. I'm not going to read every single one to you. All right, so your strategic profile, your SAP ETOP, that's our analytical tool. Our global tools checklist, well, strategic planning and support, is it top down? And again, in terms of governance, the board of directors oversee the CEO and upper management. Top down, is the firm willing to commit resources, not just talk about something, but actually fund it? Top down, is the firm willing to develop and support a planning staff? Top down, is the firm willing to outline a detailed planning schedule? We're going to do this. We're going to, when, I know you want to do it when. We're going to have a doctoral program at when. Understand the goals, objectives, and mission vision of the firm. Top down, do they really, do that? You remember the 4 Ps of marketing. I'm not going to speak to that. And, again, within the context of a wider environment, SAP ETOP, environmental threats and opportunities. Speaking of which, some of the factors, it's not an all-inclusive list, but some of the ETOP factors, or when I say, well, the business environment, this is what I mean. What's the economic condition like? Political situation, sociocultural, legal, regulatory, technological, to name a few. And we'll end with a few slides here rather than speaking about it, just demonstrating Capitalism. What is the environment in terms of systems of economic distribution? Capitalist, socialist, or highly centralized, meaning pure government control. And again, we're not here to make political arguments. Whatever helps you sleep nights. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. The system here is a capitalist system, and I'll full stop there and continue. Capitalism rocks. What about global politics? Plenty of places where there's plenty of tension in the world. Dangerous world. What about supply chain and outsourcing and things like that? What about sociocultural issues? Because we don't all believe the same things. Everybody's your brother until the rent comes due. What about economics? Inflation, recession. Is it cyclical around the world? Or is the entire world going, God forbid, into recession? Politics, global politics, and of course, technology, artificial intelligence being a big factor. All right, that's pretty much, I'm going to stop share. That's pretty much what I wanted to cover today, just to give you an inkling and a sense of another aspect of business policy. I know that you are working with the CAP-SIM simulation thing, and that does a few things, and that's a good thing in that regard. But again, policy is bigger than that. Policy is about more than just that, and hopefully this PowerPoint will give you some perspective on that. We will be meeting shortly for our Zoom session, those that are able to attend. And if you have any questions, issues, or concerns, email me. Have a blessed day. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll chat soon.